who are just joining, welcome back to the Influencers Journey Show. And today's topic is why the resurgence of podcasts. Now, I'm super excited today because we have a guest. Can you say hooray? We have a guest. So, the guest that I have the pleasure to introduce today is a woman in tech leader, and she's also an entrepreneur. As a self described tech lover, she is a baby boomer who sees herself as an encourager to other women, especially seasoned immigrant women who struggle to have a voice while at the same time being intimidated by technology. Now, she has launched her first podcast in 2014, Chatting with the Experts, in which she interviews local, regional, and international business owners. Now, what inspires and motivates her is always looking for ways to give back to women, especially immigrant women like herself. And in 2020, she changed her focus of the podcast to seeking out, interviewing, and showcasing women, first and second hand generation children of immigrants from Africa, the Caribbean, who have migrated to North America and Europe. She also coaches women on how to start podcasting and is also serving what she offers. One of her clients now hosts two successful podcasts in the UK, Tessie Talks and Tessie Leads. Now, she's also contributed to the book Wired to Govern, a trustee's handbook for the digital revolution, published in 2015 by Bateswell London LLP, and is presently writing her book. How cool and amazing is that? But I'll tell you, what I love most about her is her heart of gold and her infectious smile. Please help me welcome Paula Okonneh, or affectionately known as Podcast Paula. Hey, Podcast Paula, welcome.
Hi, Taria. Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be on your show today, Taria.
Yes, I'm so excited, to have you. And before we jump into our conversation, I just want to give our super achievers a little backstory about how you and I met. So
Right.
I remember getting a call from Suzanne, which is also the co-host of the Influencers Journey show. She's away on vacation, just in case our super achievers are wondering, where's Suzanne? So she is in lovely Mexico. So she
Woo!
will be returning for a book club reading on Monday. So I remember getting a call from Suzanne. And Suzanne was so excited. And she said to me, oh my gosh, I just had the most amazing interview with a young lady, Paula, podcast Paula. And she went on and she shared with me all of the details of the podcast. And one of the things that she actually said is, Taria, when we get ready to launch the episodes of the Influencer's Journey, I found the person who is going to help us do that. And that was you, Podcast Paula. So I was just like, oh, cool. Little did I know, a few short months later, I would have the opportunity to network with you every week in the V Team Empowerment Networking group. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a lady that Suzanne was talking about. And Suzanne is right. She's absolutely amazing. And so right then and then, I knew that I had to have you come on, as a guest on the Influencer's Journey. So thank you, so much, for making the time to just come and sit and have this beautiful conversation with our super achievers. I'm excited. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to share is, how did you get into podcasts?
Ah, oh, well, that's a long story, but let me begin.
We got time.
So, believe it or not, I was petrified of public speaking. Petrified. But I had a small business in which I did web design and development. And I would go for networking meetings, and which I would, give my 30 seconds or 1 minute spiel about what I did. But I noticed so many other people were doing similar things to me. In other words, there were so many people doing web design and development. And so I asked myself, how can I stand out? How can I be different? And so it so happened that, excuse me, I listened a lot to Sirius XM radio, and I'd listened to the interviewers interview fantastic people, people that whose names are public, like there was Randy Zuckerberg. I'd listened to her interview. She's the sister of Mark Zuckerberg, who we all know. And I'd say, oh my gosh, I'd love to do something like this. But of course, I told you I didn't like public speaking, and I couldn't see any way in which I could, do something similar to that. So one day I was driving at the same time thinking, I want to do something different, stand out from just, not just, but from doing web design and development. And I heard somebody talk about iTunes. I went in one ear and the other because I was always hearing about, Mom, can I have an iTunes card for my children? But the more this person spoke, the more I listened in. And they were talking about something called podcasting. I realized that podcasting was a feature of iTunes that not too many people knew about. And it kind of mirrored the radio show interviews that I had been listening to and fascinated by. And that's when my decision was made that this is what I've been praying about and this is what I want to do. And that's how I started podcasting. So the next networking meeting I went to, I gave my usual spiel about I do web design and development. And then I said something else. And I also do podcasting. And you could see the
Everybody leaned in.
and I said, and anyone who would like to be a guest on my show, meet me afterwards. And the rest is history.
I love it. I love it. Now, you said something very interesting because, like I said, the first time that I was ever asked, to be on a podcast, it was actually Blog Talk Radio. So that was, the platform. And I myself, like I said, I was just like, I was good, you know, afraid of public speaking, but always knew that speaking is one of the ways, or actually the best ways, to introduce people to your product, your service, your business, get them the opportunity to know who you are and what you do, how you serve, but always shy, of taking the stage. So when the person said, we're going to do a Blog Talk Radio show, we're going to have you on as a guest, and don't worry about it, it's going to be like a phone call. And like I said, that was many years ago. That had to be probably back in 2014, 2015. And I have to admit, I wasn't a big podcast, fan before then. But eventually, I started to notice something very interesting in the space, that the podcast started to become more popular. I started to see more and more influencers hosting their podcast shows, and I started to listen to more podcasts. And as a matter of fact, it's incorporated into my daily personal learning. So every morning I have select podcasts that I listen to, and so every morning I spend about a hour of my morning just listening, to podcasts. And in case y'all don't know, podcasts and audiobooks, they count as my learning. So for those of you, who's like, I don't have the time, just listen to the audio. You get a lot of benefit, around that. So that was my experience with podcasting as well. Okay,
Absolutely.
so I have another question. So I once I started to build my brand, the avenue that I took a look at was live stream videos. So I remember, even before Facebook Live was the thing, there was a platform called Blab, and I remember getting on Blab, and then there was Periscope, and we did those platforms for a while, and of course the regular webinars. Then Facebook Live came onto the scene. So I'm going to ask you, why podcasts? Because even back in the day, a few years ago, like I said, not too many people were talking about podcasts. So why podcasts and why do they work?
Oh, good question. Well, similar to you, and as you heard me say earlier on, I was afraid of public speaking. But I knew in my heart I wanted to serve. I wanted to hear the story behind the business. I work mainly or network mainly with small business owners. And I felt that, okay, this would give me an opportunity to hear what they were saying, to
Hmm.
hear the story behind the business. Because initially, when I started, I was speaking primarily to small business owners who were either local or regional. And I wanted them to share their stories and encourage others by talking about their ups, so their triumphs, and also about the challenges that they had overcome. Now, for me, the podcast enabled me to do that because I didn't have to get in front of the camera. I could talk to them. And as Taria mentioned, those days, I would talk to them on the phone and I would record that phone conversation. And so I wanted that opportunity to share and give them an opportunity to encourage others who saw them. Because, we see people, we see their successes, but we don't know really what happened. How did they get to where they are? And so that was one reason I started. It did two things. It helped me overcome my fear of public speaking because the more I spoke to them, the more comfortable I became. And as I shared, I found that I developed a relationship with these business owners. So much so that I remember going to someone's business and I had seen her in the past. And I drove up to the office unannounced and sat in my car and said, okay, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to go in. And at 10 o'clock, I got on my car, walked to the front door, and it opened. And I was like, okay, do you know who I am? And they're like, yes, you are Paula, you do podcasting. So that's one reason I'd say why a podcast. It gives you visibility, it gives you confidence. And if you're someone like me who is, or was petrified of public speaking, it helps you overcome that and helps you have a voice.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And one of the things that you mentioned was the inspiration behind the podcast is to have business owners share their stories. And that's one of the things that, we do here, on the Influencers Journey Show and even in our Super, Achievers Network. We,
Mhm.
make it our duty and our point, to let our super achievers know that there's always a story. In other words, there's always a why
Yes.
that someone does something. So, you start a business. What is the why? What is the story behind, that business? And it's through
Excellent.
sharing that story or those stories, those are the things that, endear your audience to you. Like I said, it allows you, like we say all the time, it's the difference of looking at your ideal clients and then finding your divine clients, and your
Mhm.
divine clients are the people who you know that you are appointed to serve. And so I love that that's the basis behind your podcast, chatting with the experts and just encouraging entrepreneurs, to share their stories. So I'm going to ask you, what was the inspiration behind chatting with the experts? What's your story?
I think I've already given you a hint. My story really was to, have a platform that small business owners could come and share their story, tell others about their successes, tell others about their struggles, let others know that, I did it and so can you. And chatting with the experts, I chose that name after much prayer, saying, I would like a name that pops, stands out, and has a meaning. And everyone who came on the show, even though they may not have felt that they were an expert, they became an expert because they were talking about their business. And I've said to so many small business owners, and I still continue to say that there's no one better qualified to talk about your business than you. You know why you started, you know whatever struggles you're having, you know the services you offer and why you offer them, and you know your customers and you know your target customers. So as you talk about your business on a platform that you're comfortable with, and in this case, we're talking about podcast, as you talk about your business on your podcast, you are able to convey to your potential customer, client, your mission, your why, and your how. And with the inflection in your voice, and of course, if you're passionate about what you're doing, a podcast can convey that to the listening audience. Because many times when you start a podcast, you know your target audience, you know who you want to speak to, and you speak to them. There's nothing to me better than a voice. There's nothing to me that conveys a message better than hearing the voice. And of course, because a podcast is an on-demand file that you can listen to at your convenience, you can multitask with it. You know, it cuts down on screen time. Your voice conveys something to that listener that makes them in the end feel they know you. And there's no one better to do business with than someone who you know, like, and trust. So, chatting with the experts was inspired by wanting to have a platform where business owners, small business owners, could share their stories and feel safe about doing that.
I love it. And, one of the things that I hear you talk about all the time, you said it several times, is the voice. And it's so true, just being able to listen, and have that voice come over it. It almost becomes like a staple of in the home. So I know when I listen to podcasts, and like I said, it's become part of my daily routine that I do now. My kids, they're able to tell immediately who I'm listening to. Sometimes they sit and they listen, and they pick up things, and even in passing. So I know sometimes with video, there's a tendency, oh, you have to sit, you have to be focused, and you watch the video, right?
Yes.
But podcast gives you the opportunity to even do that, like in different formats. Like, I'm not a proponent of telling people to watch social media, well, to watch the influencers journey show while you're driving. Don't do that. But the podcast for the influencers journey show is coming shortly. So you guys will be able to enjoy it in that format soon. Okay. And so I think I just opened up for the next question that I wanted to ask and have you kind of explore a little bit with our super achievers, is why audio, over any other medium. So we have written, which you could do blog posts. That's a great way for you to get exposure out there. We have different social media platforms. We have video platforms. But for you, why audio podcasting over any other medium?
Yeah. So, I don't know how many of us realize that the first voice we hear is in utero, our mother's voice. There's that power of the voice, you know. Um, and, as I mentioned earlier, when you listen to someone, and especially now we're listening on our mobile devices, there's a connection that happens. It's really deep. It's almost as if you can see the person. You can
Mm,
hear the inner soul, as they talk about whatever it is they're passionate about. As we know, the different genres of podcasting. As Taria, you mentioned that you have podcasts that you listen to learn.
mhm.
You listen to audiobooks, you said. Similar, very similar to podcast. But there is a connection that is made through the voice. Another thing is that because it's on demand, you can listen to it while driving. As you mentioned, it's not wise to watch a video and drive. It's not recommended at all. But audio enables you to listen on those long drives you sometimes have and actually go back and listen to something again. That was one reason to that I love the podcast, was that if there was a point or something that the host or the guest said, if it was an interview show style podcast that I wanted to hear, I could go back and rewind and listen to it again. I couldn't do that with radio shows. I remember and I recall so many times before I discovered podcasts that there would be a show that I'd be listening to on the radio, and I get to where I'm going and I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to hear the end of this, but I can't because I got to get out my car and, go to the appointment. But when I discovered podcasts, I was like, okay, when I come back, I'll finish listening
Yes.
to it in my car, or better still, if I had to walk in, I could still just switch it over to my phone, my smartphone, and continue listening to it until I actually got to where I was going. So audio has a powerful influence. There's something about the voice that just can't be undermined. And that's why I like the audio podcast. Of course, things have evolved. Like everything tech, things never stay the same. And so when I first started, it was mainly the audio file. Now it has evolved into the video podcast, and that has its own place um, as well. And but for me, I really do like the audio. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm biased.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and one of the things too, because I do find myself, with certain influencers kind of binge listening to podcasts. One of the things that I like is that it puts personality behind their body of work. So
Mm,
sometimes you have a book. And actually, I'm giving strategy because this is actually how I do a lot of my learning,
mhm,
my continuous learning. So one of the things that I do, say we're reading, the book, like I mentioned in the book, The Pumpkin Plan by Mike McAllowitz. One of the things that I've come to realize is that there are a lot of different ways that influencers can touch their audience and they could serve. So even while you have a book, having like the book on audio, which can serve as a form of a podcast,
mhm,
brings personality to the book. So you get the opportunity to feel and know, the author. So it's like you almost feel like I call them my virtual coaches and virtual
mhm,
mentors because a lot of
mhm.
times when I listen, I think that they're talking or speaking directly to me. And so one of
Absolutely.
the things that I've learned to do is that yeah, I would go and I would search for them on podcast platforms. And what we'll find is that they have continuous conversations,
Mhm,
around their business, how they serve, and they do that via podcast. So you have one resource, that's the book. And of course,
mhm,
you could always go to the website, their programs, but being able to connect in that way, with influencers, especially those of us out there who are authors. This is like a really great tip for you. If you're an author, you want to push, or get more people, more visibility on your book, have a book, have a podcast, whether it's an audio podcast or, video format to go along with that. Because, like I said, once you find the people who are your divine clients, your audience, they're really tuning into the conversation, they really want more. And
mhm.
so that's one of the things that, I find that I love about podcasts.
Yes, absolutely. And I've also found that coming back to my initial story of not liking to be in front of the camera, there's some people who are still so scared about the camera. They're just not comfortable. Like my guests tend to be at this stage immigrant women from Africa and the Caribbean, and many of them, I do a 15 minutes pre-interview to find out if we are fit. And many of them, the first question is, am I going to be on camera? And I reassure them that no, this is audio. And then some of them, many of them, I would say, probably about 80% of them give a sigh of relief, like,
Of relief.
yes, I don't want to be on camera. Some of them agree to say, we can do a small clip, like probably a 2 to 5 minute clip,
Mhm.
talking either behind the scenes, talking about before we got on the podcast or after we finish recording the podcast that we can use as a promoter or trailer prior to dropping the podcast. But for a lot, they're like, I'm comfortable with this. Let's just do audio. So
Yeah.
there, as you said, Taria, there's always your divine audience that you want to touch. My divine audience are these women who would typically prefer to not be on camera.
Yeah, yeah, and I love it because it there's so many different range like for me, one of the things that I've come to understand is that starting with video, and this is, my personal take, world
Mhm.
according to Taria, starting off with the video, because, once you start off with the video, you have the option, to do so many things. You could get the audio file, which can be a podcast. You could,
Mhm.
turn it into a written format, which becomes your blog, newsletters, things like that on your website. You could even source that, for stuff for your social media. But I
Mhm.
think one of the biggest points that we're trying to make here, today for super achievers, those of you who are, still hiding out, a little timid, about public speaking and getting your message out there on platforms, is that you do have to start. And
Yes.
for those of you who have started, you do have to continue to be
Yes.
mindful of how you expand the brand. And so don't let the intimidation of video, scare you. You have the another option, which is podcast, which is
Yes.
a very viable option. Like I said, the name of the show is Why the Resurgence of Podcast, because that's one of the things that I've been looking at over the years, how podcasts, has, been making a serious comeback in the marketplace. And it's one of the best ways, for versatility, for people to connect with the audience, get their message out there, generate leads, and ultimately, get clients. So it's not something to sneeze at. There's a lot of different ways that you could, source for platforms, for podcasting, all of that stuff. So I absolutely